Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. Apologies that we are probably 20 seconds late because it says 12:31 on my digits here, but we will run for 1 hour. I'm Paul John Dykes, and today, what a lineup we have in store. To my right, I think, it's Alan Morrison, who joins us for his monthly hour to talk all things Celtic. And every time Alan comes on, we've loads to catch up on. I'm looking forward to hearing some of the reasons behind the European humbling, as well as the forthcoming Aberdeen game. We're going to be talking about youth development with Sligo. Is Paul Tisdale what the doctor ordered? The evolution of Scalesy. And of course, we have Jim Orr, the Oracle, often described as the thinking man's Acsom contributor. Jim, welcome back to the show.
Thinking man's Acsom contributor. He's made
yes, I just made it up right on the
That's
spot.
Alan Morrison, surely. That's Alan Morrison, surely. That's him.
That doesn't fit well. Doesn't fit well on a cup, does it? Really, it's a bit clunky.
Try to figure out who I'm pointing at. But Alan Morrison's that. Surely, that's an accolade for that chap. Surely.
Okay, you could share it. Sometimes in Scottish football, titles have been shared and claimed ownership of one side.
Let's go there. Let's go there.
Throw the grenade. Let's
now
throw
we're
the
talking.
grenade
now we're talking.
Forget about the doctor.
Nice
Let's go there.
Yeah.
Titles.
Yeah, the football doctor. What do you think, guys? The people that give themselves their own nicknames. I've never been a big fan. Remember Paul Ince did it? He was the governor, wasn't he?
So,
remember
is this guy called himself the doctor?
Oh yes, he's a football doctor, Jim.
He has called himself the doctor.
Oh yes, self-proclaimed.
Excellent. That's the guy we want.
I mean, I call you the Oracle, but we call you that. You don't call yourself that, you know?
Yeah, that's bizarre, isn't it?
I think so. Yeah,
that's quite bizarre. Is that a red flag straight away?
It's a very small red flag. I mean, he might be absolutely brilliant at his job. And I've got to ask the question, do you know what the job is that we're talking here? Is he coming in as a consultant? Are they actually referring to him as a potential replacement for Mark Lowell? Alan, what's your take on this one?
Well, I can only go in what I've read. So I think 67 even, Hail, were had a write-up today. And they were certain, it seemed, that he was coming in to essentially take on Mark Lowell's old job as head of recruitment. So that was quite specific. So that suggested this wasn't a consultancy role. It wasn't a temporary gig. This was actually coming in as head of recruitment, which is interesting because, Paul Tisdale's background is largely as a coach, as a manager, and latterly as a consultant. You're going into clubs and advising them on all manner of things, from mentoring coaches to data and analytics to recruitment. So that's all very interesting. If you haven't seen this guy, honestly, there's a couple of interviews with him. He is incredibly entertaining, and this is going to go one of two ways, right? I can almost guarantee it, right? So number one is he's just going to blow everybody away. The guy's a genius, and it's going to be brilliant, right? More likely, sadly, and I'm not saying this because of any great insight into the character himself, or that I know him or anything like that. I'm just really anchoring what I'm about to say in my deep-held belief about the intransigence and conservatism of professional football. And when somebody comes into the club, into any club, frankly, any sort of traditional club, i.e. not a forward-thinking club, with his kind of personality, with his kind of energy and, ideas, and there is an arrogance about him, right? You don't get to be a senior figure in football without that arrogance and without that ego. Of course there is. But he's going to be absolute marmite to people in that organisation. They're going to love him or hate him. And he's going to have to build a constituency. He's going to have to build the trust of key individuals in the organisation to be able to work effectively, because this guy is full on, right? He is full on. He's a very interesting character. Just one little snippet. When he was manager of Exeter for 12 years. I mean, who's manager of a lower league club with those challenges that come with all the lack of resources? They were challenging almost at trying to get into the championship. I mean, Exeter are tiny, right? And 12 years he lasted there, and there's not much he didn't see or do in that time. One of the things that he did was he got rid of all the scouts. right? And the reason that he did it was because they realised they just wasted far too much time and energy, neither of which they had in abundance because they just didn't have the resources, pursuing players that they were never going to be able to sign. And so he focused their recruitment on people that first and foremost would be willing to live in the area. Because I mean, I used to live in Somerset, and it's an outpost, right? And in football sense, Exeter is a real footballing outpost in that sense. So you gotta have to start from the position of who's actually willing for the wages that we pay, who's actually willing to live in this area, and they kind of rejigged their thinking around that. So anyway, listen, I'm just saying that as an example of out the box thinking that this guy can come up with. I'm not saying he would do that at Celtic, of course I'm not. I'm just saying it's an example of that sort of out the box thinking. So this is an absolutely fascinating appointment. Look out! There's an interview on a YouTube channel called Business of Sport with him. It's an hour long. Even if he wasn't coming to Celtic, I would recommend you watch it because it's so entertaining. The way when he talks about data and analysis, he absolutely nails it. He absolutely gets it. What the limitations are, what the uses are, what the issues are, when it's appropriate, when it's not appropriate, what you need to do with it, what you don't need to do with it. All of that, he's absolutely gets. So I'm super excited about this if it comes off, but I just fear it will be too rich for many people in the organisation in terms of the tsunami of a personality that's about to hit them. And is the club willing to give him the space, give him the time, give him the support, integrate him into the club culture, etc., in a way that allows them to be effective? That's my biggest fear.
Well, this is the thing, because if you are anywhere near a character who isn't the norm, who isn't going to fit as part of a jigsaw and a culture, I'm not sure Scottish football as a whole accepts that, right? But Celtic obviously seem willing to bring that charisma and that personality and that character into the room. But as you say, Alan, I think that you've got to be focusing, Jim, on what he brings to the table beyond that. If he is going to increase the success rate, for example, of signings, if he's going to be looking at data in terms of recruitment, but also data analysis within the group of players you've already got and utilise that better than we already are, I'm absolutely all for it. My big thing is, if we're going to appoint anyone, it needs to be in consultation with the football manager. Jim, I think that's one of the key areas of bringing in anybody who's going to be trying to develop players or bring players to the football club. You've got to do that with the full stamp of approval from Brendan Rodgers. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I've been otherwise engaged the last few weeks. I've not had a chance to watch the videos, read the stories, but it certainly sounds a character. I just saw some photographs. The guy looks like an Exeter for madness. Don Mackay get the bullet. He wore decent suits. So what chance has this guy got? I think it is an interesting appointment. As Alan says, it will either be a spectacular success, it will sink without trace. 12 years managing one club. I'm always interested in the qualifications for doing certain jobs. What's the person's spec for this kind of stuff? I don't know what it is. I'm a bit in the dark as to the specific job the guy's going to do. In consultation with the manager, I'm not so sure. I mean, I think the way football's developing, there's so many people involved at the club. So can the manager really have a handle on everything that's happening? I think people have their specific jobs to do that well. Hopefully that ties within the kind of a bigger structure within the club. But the guy will be a big success, or will be a disastrous failure. So, I've been interested in watching it. I want to go and watch this video now to see what the guy's coming away with. But I mean, football's a simple game at the end of the day. I think we overcomplicate things at times. Anyways, I haven't had a chance to see what the guy's like, but I shall watch with interest.
Yeah, I mean, the name comes up. I found it quite interesting that he was obviously a guest at the Queen's Park friendly game. It's a match I would have been at because I was on holiday and I couldn't get to it, but I was invited to go along, and it would have been tremendous to maybe get something, an early scoop, as they used to call it, from Paul Tisdale. Definitely a character, a personality, someone with loads of charisma, a football career in terms of playing that spanned 89 games. Now, that doesn't mean he can't do the job you're talking about, but I was very interested in someone who's just 51, having managed 738 games. And that's where this 12-year stint at one club comes in, where he is managing a club with a shoestring budget. And obviously, everything has to be maximised. And I think we've spoken about this before, Alan, on Acsom. Within Scottish football, if a team was able to get all that backroom stuff right, it wouldn't be about budgets in terms of recruitment. If they could get the data analysis correct, if they could get the recruitment and the scouting correct and the youth development correct, then they would stand a chance league. But I mean, even, the recent announcement that Hearts were looking to bring in someone who has a track record doing well in recruitment, straight away you're thinking, well, they'll probably have a better recruitment department than us if they were to do that. And Celtic should be at the forefront. We should have all those boxes ticked. It's definitely not an old pals act. There's no connection whatsoever to the Celtic brand and to the Celtic Football Club and everything that goes with that. Do you need it at that level? Or should it be someone who has got no skin in the game? They're just absolutely brilliant at what they're coming in to do.
Yeah, well, it has to be the latter for me. Absolutely, 100%. And, again, we've all seen people that say all the right things. Okay, so we need to be cautious. As I say, when you're looking at these senior roles, it's as much about how, as Jim said, it's getting the job spec right, it's getting the roles, responsibilities clearly understood, and everyone on the same page as to this is what this person's going to do. This is what they're not going to do. These are the touch points. This is how we resolve any conflict, etc. And until that's not all clear, then everyone's kind of set up to fail. So that's the crucial bit. That's an organisational piece that Celtic need to get right. But this guy, he comes in, definitely saying all the right things. So, for example, he got the extra job on the back of. He was asked the question: Is it win at all costs, or is it about developing performance? And he answered the question correctly. The correct answer is developing performance, because if you focus on performance, then that's a predictor for what your future results will be. Whereas, football is a low-scoring sport. You can get a result against anyone in theory if the luck goes your way. So it's all about performance. So he's very much on that spectrum in terms of the right direction. And he also speaks at length about exactly what you just said, Paul, the need to get all of the components in the organisation right that you can and maximised efficiently to make up for any shortfalls that you have in terms of being able to spend money on footballers, for example. So this is all relevant for Celtic in the context of trying to compete against Champions League teams, right? We're not going to suddenly be able to buy an Adeyemi or a Julian Brandt or players like that. But what you can do is you can have the best of all of the other bits that make up running a football club, so that you're stressing every margin, you're stressing every asset to get the best out of them in terms of the quality of their organisation, if not the amount of money that you're spending on the actual wage bill. So he's saying all the right things. He comes from the right, for me anyway, exactly the sort of thing. And the fact that we're even looking at someone like this, I'm hoping, is a sign that organisationally we're starting to become a little bit more open-minded from this sort of what I'd characterise as a sort of heads down, aren't we brilliant? It doesn't matter what we do, we win in Scotland, aren't we great? And then we get the Champions League money, we put it in the bank. And this sort of closed attitude of, not actually realising that you're measuring yourself completely against the wrong metrics, the wrong KPIs, and you're not actually succeeding, you're actually failing if you measure yourself against your European peers. If this is a sign that someone has lifted their head up and seen the world in that way, and we're actually moving forward to getting fresh ideas, fresh innovation, fresh insight into the club, then let's give it a chance.
Yeah.
I mean, you've mentioned what the guy has done. What kind of results has the doctor achieved then?
So I think with Exeter, I think got to remember, listen, Exeter is one of the smallest football clubs in the English pyramid. I think he nearly got them into the Championship, right? He got them competing. He got them up from the conference up 2 divisions. I think he took MK Dons up in his first year, and then I think they lost 6 out of the first 7 games and they sacked him. But generally speaking, I think he made Exeter. He made them about £17 million in that 12 years in terms of transfer fees incoming, and basically, which basically keeps the club afloat essentially. So and he said, and he talked about that at length, because he said that's essentially what the key metrics were for the football club. It wasn't about, did we beat Morecambe 2-0? It was, are we going to be able to pay wages at the end of the month? Are we projected to break even at the end of the year? And he delivered against those expectations as much as the footballing expectations. If you see what I mean.
But in terms of the consultation, Alan, you say he's out giving other clubs consultations. What did they do then with the information that he imparted to them?
I don't know, Jim. I'll be honest. I know he worked with Crystal Palace. I know he worked with Fulham, but to precisely what the remit was and to precisely what outcome, I couldn't say. But I share your kind of cynicism in terms of what does that actually mean. But I just think
it's not so much cynicism, Alan. Sorry, it's not so much cynicism. It's more the kind of, if he went in and he got Crystal Palace or Fulham to implement X, Y, Z, and they've then achieved ABC, you say, well, there's your evidence. That's what's happened. Because Exeter, I mean, laudable though that was. I mean, you're thinking, are you able to scale that up? Whatever happened to Exeter into the higher echelons? We start dealing with multi-million-pound players and big egos,
Champions League aspirations,
and all the stuff that goes with it. So it may be easy to do some of this stuff at that kind of level. Once you start scaling stuff up, there's different challenges then appear. It's more the kind of, he's coming to us. If it's a permanent thing, he's obviously bringing his consultation skills to the game, and it'd be useful to know what were the outcomes from the consultations that he did with other clubs that we might achieve. And obviously, as you said, the kind of ultimate goal is to be competitive in the Champions League as opposed to not even participate another week. But I get what the goal is, but it'd be interesting to see what he's actually done.
Yeah, and you're talking about consultation results. Did we ever get the consultation results from Gordon Strachan's study on the football club? Because remember, he was drafted in, and there was a little bit of controversy that he was also employed at the time by Dundee. Talking about perfect link, what a segue this is. 19 tickets left to see Gordon Strachan 2 weeks tonight. So if you fancy coming along, the link's underneath the video. The way I'm looking at it, Jim, is our big criticism in Acsom, I think, when it comes to the club is, we get how well managed on a financial level the club is and how the brand is growing on a global basis in relation to merchandise, etc., going and playing in America in the summer. That's all to do with, improving the brand. Get all that, absolutely brilliant. The success on the park speaks for itself, a generation of success. But one thing we have always gone back to is the fact that in terms of recruitment, there was aspects of that we weren't happy with as fans on a Celtic state of mind. And it wasn't just that, the hit rate's not big enough. We were looking at how we recruited players and what data recruitment was used in that process. And having spoken to Brendan Rodgers a year ago in October 2023, he was doubtful that the data was being used soundly and efficiently at the football club. And obviously the example at that time that was used was Gustav Lagerberg, who's no longer at the club. So I think that if you bring someone in, and of course, it's been a vacant post for a while now since Mark Lowell left the building and Joe Dudgeon left the building. I think, obviously, we've already spoken about Jay Lefebvre, whose name I still can't pronounce properly, stepping into Joe Dudgeon's, I almost said dungeon, Joe Dudgeon's position. But Mark Lowell's post has been vacant. So the way I'm looking at it is, I see it as a positive step. Whether or not he can do the job effectively, who knows? You never know about any position within a football club, be that a player or a manager or anywhere else. So I think it's a positive step, Alan, that we're actually looking to fulfill a position, and you hope that the length of time it's taken, it's not just one candidate that's blown them away in an interview. It's like we have gone through the due process of speaking to a number of candidates.
Yeah, I mean, I can only presume that has been the case. As I say, this is very much not the mould of how we know that Celtic do business, which is find somebody with Celtic credentials that's perhaps played for the club, etc. And that it's the tired old way of doing stuff. In professional football, especially in Scotland, and Celtic do seem to be miles behind in terms of. We've talked about this for years now, Paul, you and I, about refreshing the back room, the whole football operations side. So, if it is a step in that direction, it may still be a step in the right direction, and it may not work. Right, in terms of the intentions, maybe the right intentions here. The direction of travel may be the right direction of travel, but the individual, given his personality and what have you, it may not fit culturally into the organisation. That is a possibility, but that's why you need to spend time recruiting these senior roles, because it's as much about culture and fit and environment as it is about what's on the CV. the fact that you could look at his CV and Jim, can ask questions about English lower league, how does this scale, etc., all relevant questions. But until you don't get to know that person, hear their ideas, and then perhaps have one-to-ones with the key other senior people that they're going to interact with on a daily basis, you don't get a sense of how could this work, what could be the benefits here. So hopefully that's all been gone through. Hopefully it's a step in the right direction. I do think that, as I say, it may not work out, but I think the direction is a good direction.
Yeah, because we were talking previously about nepotism, the old PALS Act and all that kind of stuff when people are employed at the football club. This is the other end of that scale. So let's see how it goes. Gordon Coney comes in to say it should be who is best qualified for the job. Absolutely, Gordon. And I think a week or two ago, I actually threw this in, and it wasn't just for a reaction. It was on the basis of his, for me, largely successful recruitment whilst he was at the football club. Neil Lennon's record, and I took quite a bit of flack for suggesting that he could, because the discussion around about that time was that he could return to the club in a role not as the football manager, of course. Ian Roy, as a world-renowned club, we should have in place top dietitians, sports psychologists, fitness and power coaches in-house. Now, I'm going to use this, Ian, to talk about another one of the topics that we have mentioned at the top of the show. I totally agree with it. Paul McLean, though, comes in to say Celtic aren't a world-renowned club. Keep it sensible. Yes, they are, Paul. They absolutely are. And all you would need to do, it's a very small example, but in order to get the type of sales that you require on the merchandise lines that Adidas have been so impressed by, and to then go up to the top tier, the elite level, you need to be selling massive amounts of units all over the globe. So that's just one example. You can then look at the CSCs all over the planet in relation to the fan base. They are world renowned, and I know sometimes it can be a bit of a cliche thing when you sign a player from the other end of the world. They always talk about being aware of Celtic, be that listening to a radio in Kenya or playing Subutio in Italy. Celtic Football Club are known all around the world. Now, the point that Ian made, though, talking about we should have the best at every single level, and I agree with him. Apparently, we were a Mickey Mouse club, Jim, according to Carlton Cole. Carlton Cole, who made 5 appearances for the football club, who scored 1 goal, if you can even say it was his goal against Inverness, you'll remember it, bounced off him, ended up in the net. And he can't even remember the name of the manager at the time, Ronnie Dyler. Right. What
depends your definition of Mickey Mouse. World-renowned Mickey Mouse. So
Mickey Mouse did all right, yeah.
Did all right, aye. It was okay. No, I think...
Mickey Mouse is world-renowned.
He is. Yeah,
so you can't argue with that. Snappy dresser as well. I think also, just before we can move on to that, the strategy is always the thing that interests me as well, about never mind who we want to recruit in terms of players. I think it was in the chairman's report talking about we want young players who we can sell and make loads of money from. And I think that's the wrong strategy. And I think if we're going to talk about Dortmund at some point in time, it's the fact we've no experienced players on that park, apart from Carl McGregor. And I spoke over the summer, who do you want to sign? I want to sign experienced players. Mm-hmm. It's great we're spending silly money on young guys who could be great. But that showed up, that strategy against Dortmund, I think. When I'd run out of couches to hide behind at one point.
How many couches did it get to, Jim?
I went to DFS and then just kind of did the rounds in the 24, I think, at one point. I mean, that was horrendous. I mean, I'd imagine you've talked about that ad nauseum, but it could have been 12, 13, 14.
We have spoken about it, Jim, but we need to also get your view on it. We need to get Alan's view on it, because we haven't spoken to you two guys.
Do you want to bring this up again? I mean, I thought we'd get hammered. I thought we'd get hammered, but I don't want to say I thought we'd get hammered. I just said it's a 2-coucher for me and left it at that. And then I spoke to you afterwards. You said, "You sure? Maybe it's a 3-coucher. I don't know." Individually, collectively, tactically, awful. We don't have the players to play that kind of containing game. It's embarrassing. I mean, again, I said over the summer, we need experienced players, guys with a bit of nous. You don't have to spend a lot of money on these guys, just guys that have experience, European pedigree. We're not talking about top players, we're talking about guys 29, 30. They know how to manage games of football. But it was like, I mean, I'm quite a squeamish person. Every time I give blood, you're thinking, please let this be over, please. Giving blood, It's like giving blood. Please let this be over. Please let this be over.
Please
That
take
was
that
after
needle
20
away.
minutes. That was after 20 minutes. Please let this be over.
Yeah.
And you felt faint at one point. Like, please don't score anymore. And they were coming in waves. They were coming in waves. It wasn't like, we're kind of rear guard action like kind of they were coming in waves. It was like 4 against 2 and it was just awful. Just awful. And we were basically St Johnson, weren't we? Tonight, Matthew, I'll be St Johnson. I mean, it was terrible. And that's my observation of it. I don't know the kind of individual stats that Alan will jump in here and give us the XGs and all this kind of stuff. But basically, Mickey Mouse performance, giving blood was more enjoyable. No, so it was a big, actually, I thought with my serious hat on, it was a huge night for the manager.
Yeah.
Because I think the manager will leave after these 3 years and he'll want to go into something bigger and better than us. And I know Celtic fans will say you can't get bigger and better than us, but in terms of they want to go into a bigger league. And if he does manage to take 1 or 2 scalps, other clubs will look at him and think, you know what? He's got the moxie for this. But he's getting horsed. And he's getting horsed in the most ridiculous way possible. And that's a major blot in his copybook. And no matter what he said after the game, totally, utterly embarrassing. And if you add that to what happened in the previous week, so and also Nicholas Kuhn, I felt as well, this was a big chance for him because obviously he's been one of our best, if not our best player this season. He's been back to Germany. See, if he had a good game that night in Germany against a team like Dortmund, then the national teammate came calling, and he wasn't the only one. They all froze. It was like St Johnson playing us, where we're just struggling. We don't know what we're doing, and it was giving blood. Sorry, Alan, you go give us facts.
Well, I mean, we'll get a wee bit from Alan because one of the biggest things I would point out. I mean, talking about couches, can you remember the Dykes Furniture Store? No, remember that?
Of course, we remember that.
You remember that? You remember the adverts?
Here?
No, they never left any of the inheritance to me, unfortunately, when they sold it to DFS or wherever it went. But in terms of hiding behind the couch, Jim, I think this is the type. What you see on the park is the tip of the iceberg. So, see, when we're talking about all this far-reaching football recruitment strategies and models and all that, I think because we get that wrong, when you look at the tip of the iceberg and what we see on a night like we did last Tuesday, it's the roots of the problem that I think we need to look at. We don't just have to look at who was on the park at that given moment, because I don't think we've got all the preparatory work correct. And I think we need to look at data. We need to look at recruitment, scouting, youth development before you can then have a team on the football park. It's not about going out and signing 11 guys who can hold their own in the Champions League for me.
Totally agree. But if you take something like Engels, and at one point I forgot he was playing. And he's when he's playing here, people saying this guy's a baller. This guy's a baller. Aye, maybe against St Johnson and Ross County. It wasn't against Ross County, in fact. But he's playing Champions League for the first time, so it's a huge. And what I said last season, Lagerbielke could come on first game, sent off. Home comes on Champions League first game, sent off. And that's where you need the experience. And we didn't have the experience. And we sold Iwata, who was the kind of guy that, I'm not saying he's a great player, but he's the kind of guy who could have maybe fit into that kind of game. We didn't have the players to play them, and we don't have the players for the next game as well. And that's a free culture as well. Atalanta away, of course it is. I think one of these days we'll make it a bit of luck. Well, the Champions League range from DFS, you come in and pick your couch to hide behind. But we need players that are going to be able to compete, not compete, participate, even at that level. This is a rant too early for a 13.
That's all right.
1 o'clock. We need those kind of players. We've got a lot of young guys who could be really good in the future, but in the here and now, if we play against teams like Slovan Bratislava, who are our kind of level, you never know. We got a big night that we had, we give them a bit of a doing, great. We go up against quality teams. I mean, it is men against boys. It really is.
When we're looking at the whys and why nots, every single Champions League campaign, Alan, I go through our squad and I think to myself, who am I happy with when I see that starting 11 at this level? And being where we are in the food chain, there's always going to be a selection of those players that probably are a bit short, right? Or quite a bit short. But going into this year, I was looking at that team thinking to myself, right, we have got a lot of this right so far going into it. And that was one of the biggest disappointments. We'd kind of built ourselves up, not to expect a 2 or 3-0 win in Dortmund, of course not. But it was the manner in which we basically went in there and did not perform. So the guys who had, like Kuhn, as Jim had said there, like Engels, we didn't perform. And I didn't think we seen the best version of that Celtic team that we've been watching all season against Dortmund. I don't know if they froze. I don't know if it's down to the tactics. But we were rotten, as well as being completely outclassed and not strong enough. We were rotten as well. If we had played to the peak of our abilities, we probably would have still been beaten 4-1. But we were really, really poor on the night as well, though, Alan, in my view, watching it as a casual observer.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm not going to go over the game tactically because I've done it and I haven't got the energy to do it again. So if you're interested, I wrote about it extensively in graphic detail with pictures of your thing on the Celtic way last week, and I spoke about it at great and tedious length on the Huddle Breakdown last week's Friday show. So a week ago. If you go back and listen to the first 20 minutes of that show, I'll lay it all out for you. And I'm not doing it again. So,
scarred.
What a description though, to give your own show. Tedious. Quote Alan Morrison. Tune in now.
The entertaining, tedious.
Yeah, well, the number of times I had to say, and the ball ended up at the feet of Adeyemi. Yeah. 1-on-1 with the centre back is just like, which is ridiculous. Anyway, I'm not opening up old wounds now. I think okay. I'll start off 1,000 feet here. I think there's a fundamental cultural problem that we have as Celtic Football Club and as Celtic fans, is that we're locked into this. We're locked into Lisbon Lions. We're locked into that Celtic has to play a certain way. We have to play attacking football at all costs. It's not just about winning. Now, we all love that. I love that. I think it's a nice counterpoint to the culture that our rivals have, which they're locked into, and has actually got nothing to do with what happens on the pitch, and is incredibly destructive, and will probably be the death of the second of them. But our culture is about, part of our culture and makeup is about having to entertain, having to have this attacking style of play. Yeah. So that's my 1,000. I think we start from that paradigm that we're operating within this. Second of all is we've got a manager who's an internal optimist and has a huge ego. And as you said rightly, Paul, as the season unfolded, and I'm talking going all the way back to America, and we played these high-profile friendlies successfully and quite eye-openingly, the way that we dismantled Chelsea and Man City, caveats, friendlies, all that, right? But the template for how to play against what were teams stacked with multi-million-pound footballers, the template was kind of set and it looked good. And like you said, and then we start the season, and actually the bit I was most impressed with was the first few games of the season when we didn't have any new signings in the outfield, and we just looked like a really coherent, effective unit. And it all kind of made sense. It was round, players and round holes and all that sort of stuff. People like Liam Scales, Greg Taylor suddenly looked a little bit more assured, a bit more solid. The whole thing just looked better. Nicholas Kuhn, I think, was the big revelation. He just was on fire. Maeda looked like the best version of himself. It all looked really good. And I was really enthused about that because it took me back to Ange's second season where we just overwhelmed teams because of this, because of the understanding, the cohesion. Everybody knew their jobs. Everyone knew what they had to do. So that's the build up to that game. And then the second element of it is you looked at Dortmund, right? And have got a new manager who's completely changing the way that they play, from a counter-attacking team that got to a Champions League final to being more of a similar team to how Celtic play, high pressing, much more sort of front foot, and then away from a 3-4-3 to a more a 4-2-3-1 shape, all of that. And then some new signings they had to integrate, and they lost a couple of players, all those things, right? And they'd had a sticky time of it, right? Up to that point. They'd scored loads of goals, off of quite, they'd overperformed their XG massively, but they conceded a lot. They'd got absolutely taken apart and dismantled by Stuttgart. I watched them against Bochum at home. They won 4-2, but for the first 35 minutes, if I said they were awful, I couldn't even begin to describe awful to you. They were dreadful, and they should have been 3-0 down. And they eventually recovered to win the game. I am firmly of the belief that Rodgers looked at that, looked at how the team had grown over the pre-season, looked at the success they'd had in pre-season, and just fancied his chances and thought, this is a team in transition. This is a team with clear vulnerabilities. And if we just do what we've been doing and do it really well, then we've got a right good chance here. And he completely failed the Ange Postecoglou maxim, which is you plan to play your opponent playing at their best. He planned for Dortmund to play like they had in the first 35 minutes against Bochum, and we didn't get that. We got a reasonably competent Dortmund side. Somebody put in the comments, Dortmund didn't actually play that well. The frightening thing is, that's true. Their final third decision-making was terrible. They scored 7 goals off of 3 XG. We had 2 XG, right? Celtic's previous hammerings in Europe have come at the likes of PSG. We had Neymar and Cavani. We had these superstars playing for these teams. Barcelona, Messi, right? Those we've gone to pot one, not just pot one teams, but super clubs, and we've been absolutely ripped to shreds. Even Atletico Madrid, Real Madrid, stacked with absolute superstars. Getting beat by what? And I was on a show with Derek Ray. Derek Ray, absolute legend, works in German football now. Derek's measured opinion was that at the moment, Dortmund are probably the 6th best team in Germany. Right? That is sobering.
Yeah.
Okay? We got absolutely ripped to shreds by the 6th best team in Germany at the moment. Okay? And so, by the way, Leipzig are probably the 3rd best team. So just a heads up here, right? But this defeat was 100% on Rodgers' door. He set the team up to fail, and my goodness, did they fail. It was just completely over-optimistic, over-ambitious, trying to get the players to do things they cannot do at that level against that quality of opposition. Now, you can get now the other sort of caveat to that I'll just throw in, because Jim sort of touched on some of the individual performances, is that, I think, and to agree with you, Paul, about actually, we all think our recruitment's great because look at how we've been doing domestically, look how well we've been playing. But the central midfield that night of Bernardo and Engels and McGregor was a catastrophe, an absolute catastrophe. And the red flags that we learned, and listen, this isn't me writing players off, by the way, just before everyone kind of jumps down my throat on that one. These are young players, and I think there's growth in them. I was enthused by both on the basis that they both offered the sort of athleticism, physicality, box-to-boxness that I've been calling for a number of years. So they had that. But 2 things that were red flags in that game from those players was they weren't press resistant. By what I mean is against a really good, fast, aggressive pressing team, they couldn't keep the ball. And second, they couldn't break lines with their passing. The number of pack passes that Engels and Bernardo have achieved, even against Ross County, is tiny. I think they both achieved 1 in the first half each against Dortmund. Hatate came on in the second half, and I think he had 6. So they don't have the line-breaking passing ability of Hatate, and they're not press resistant, which Hatate's kind of not either, sort of thing. So I think we've got a real problem now in central midfield still, and one that the players may grow into it, but also if you put them in that system and leave them exposed like that, we're going to get ripped to shreds. So we're going to have to do something different radically. We're going to have to be a lot more compact, a lot more solid, and give these young players, as Jim says, give them a chance to succeed at this level rather than set them up to fail, because this is on Rodgers 100%. And what was so disappointing about that for me was that when Rodgers was hired, we spoke to a young analyst from Leicester City, and he was enthusiastic and full of praise for the way Rodgers would adapt his Leicester City team to go to Old Trafford, to go to Stamford Bridge, to go to Manchester City, to play away in Europe. He would adopt and he would adapt his way of playing to maximise the team's chances of getting something out of that game, and that just all went out the window in Dortmund. So I just hope it's a one-off. Everyone's being chastened. We tried to scale what's working well at home. We tried to stress it. We tried to scale it, and it fucked up massively. I mean, hugely. It's only 3 points, so that's good, right? We get another chance next week, and we've got to do better. Rodgers has got to do better.
What did you make, guys, of Rodgers after the game then? Because he was quite bullish, wasn't he? I know. By the way, I don't have an issue with the gaffer having a big ego, but he was quite bullish. I felt after the game, basically saying, "What do you expect? Do you want me to do this?" And we get 15% possession. And what did you make of all that?
That's treating us as idiots. If he thinks that's the option, if he thinks the option is a low block, 11 men across the box versus what we saw that night, he's an idiot. I'm sure he didn't believe. I'm sure he didn't believe what he was saying himself, because that's just crass nonsense.
Yeah, I think that's what managers says and what managers believe. And I'll need to hand over that negative old bloke trophy to Alan today after that rant. Well done.
I want a second rant.
I agree with everything you said.
I will hear your rant, Jim, and I will bloody
I agree with everything you said, but I'm just pleased that I'm no longer that negative old guy. Actually,
I can do that.
What did you say? What was the question again? Brendan Rodgers.
It was really the reaction after the game. And by the way, what Alan says in respect of the comments, I think you've always got to come out after a humbling like that and remember the efforts of the fans.
Yeah, you have to be positive about the whole thing. And the fans were the ones I felt sorry for.
Yeah,
travelling over there with. I mean, anyway, I think we're too optimistic into the game. Anyway, that's a different thing. But yeah, I think what the manager says. I mean, we had to be Ross County in Dortmund, and we weren't Ross County. We were this. What Alan just described there. That wasn't what we had to be. We had to be different from that. And I don't think we've got the players to be like Ross County. And the point Alan made, we need to be the Lisbon Lions every game we play. No against Dortmund, no against that quality of opposition, not with the players that we have. We have to be pragmatic, and we have to, because it's all about winning the game. I mean, I know Alan talked about the doctor talking about, developing is what it's all about. But we're in the Champions League, we need 3 points, and however you manage to get that, or even a point, whoever managed to get it, play 7 at the back, whatever you do, you need to get the points, and you need to stop getting embarrassing score lines, because it's totally and utterly embarrassing. I thought, as you said, Paul, if we went there and lost 3 or 4-0, you say, hey ho, that's the way it goes. But to lose 7-1, and it could have been 12, and Alan's obviously got all this detailed analysis. Maybe it could have been 20. Who knows? But you can't accept that. And if I was a manager, I couldn't say, I'm really sorry how that worked out. I got that wrong. I thought we could have done this, but that's just the way it goes. We'll learn our lessons. That won't happen again.
Yeah.
But to come up with, what do you want me to do? Do better. That's what we want you to do. Do better.
Mm-hmm. And you're right. What you're getting after the game and what he's saying privately might be two completely different things, Jim. Absolutely. That's how you win World Cup, says Kieran Allen. Well, I'll tell you something. There is only one Scottish footballer who's ever won a World Cup, and Rose Riley is our guest tonight on This Is Acsom. I'm good with the segues today, lads. I'm sorry, I'm blowing my own trumpet.
Super cool.
I'm not quite giving myself a nickname, but I'm blowing my own trumpet.
You've done this before, haven't you?
Absolutely. Rose Riley's on tonight. And by the way, gentlemen, I obviously knew about Rose Riley, but until you do an interview and you really dig into the research, I didn't know the extent of the success that she achieved up against a culture within Scotland where it was, you're not playing football.
Did she mention Elsie Cook? She had to mention Elsie Cook.
Yes, she did.
Elsie Cook is one of these really unsung heroes. I know Rose Riley gets all the she's a kind of golden girl. But for me, if she mentions Elsie Cook, obviously she'll tell that story tonight. And Elsie Cook is the kind of unsung hero where, anyway, watch This Is Acsom tonight. Because you'll do well to beat last week. Mr. Heyman, unbelievable guy. Unbelievable, inspirational man. He's outstanding.
Yes.
There's 2 plugs for This Is Acsom and a mug. Thank you.
There we go.
And a rant. And don't forget the rant. We're 100% on brand today, aren't we?
But I want to go back.
Over to you, ranty 2 person. On you go.
I know. Just pass the parcel. I'll get back into the comments in a second, but I don't think we gave Carlton Cole a hard enough time, Alan. I hate it when a player comes to the club, doesn't quite get it, and then leaves and doesn't have nice things to say about us. And I'm thinking, Carlton Cole's one of the worst strikers I've ever seen wearing the hoops. Yet he calls us a Mickey Mouse club. And I know that Mickey Mouse is world renowned, but Carlton, come on now, son. I mean, what's that all about?
Sorry, Paul. I didn't see what you had to say. I've got no interest in what you had to say.
Yeah,
All I'll say on that is Carlton Cole is one of the sort of poster players for Lowell Ball. He's a player that was foisted upon Ronnie Dyler. Ronnie Dyler hadn't, I don't think, any hand, act, or part in this player turning up and being played. I think it was at the same time as that clown. What's his name?
Colin Kazim Richards.
Kazim Richards, yeah. I mean, it's just a dark period in Celtic's history as regards the way the football club was being run, the way recruitment was done. So that's all I want to say about Carlton Cole. I've got no interest in, and haven't read what he said anyway, so I can't comment.
No, that's fine, absolutely fine. Carlton Cole, 5 games, 1 goal. It was against Inverness Cali. There you go. There's your career right there. Ian loves listening to you, Alan. I thought I'd bring the positivity back into the comment section. And Sean Buist, I'm thinking Buist with a B. I've just got my blood pressure down after a few years, so better not watch any more Champions League. I did like Jim's DFS Champions League range. That's the kind of thing you used to see in Not the View, a wee advert for a couch. Gerard Hackett, Paul Tisdale has playing and managing experience and knows the lower leagues in England. Mark Lowell had neither. Talking about bringing somebody in, before we touch on Liam Scales, because I do want to talk about Scalesy. What do you make, because Big Yogi and myself had a good discussion on Tuesday in relation to the changes, or the supposed changes, on the back of the Lassana Diarra case. Obviously, it's went right to the European Court of Justice. There's been a judgment. How's it going to change the landscape of recruitment in football, in your view, Alan?
Okay.
So, a big question. It's a big one.
Yeah. It is. So for number one, like these things, these legal wrangles, especially ones that sort of challenge bodies like FIFA that have their own sort of rules, regulations, obviously, and then as they butt up against law, as it is in European law or various national laws, they take a long time to resolve. And this actually, I believe this one isn't even resolved yet. There's still another Belgian appeal court to go through. So essentially, the findings are that some elements of transfer regulations that FIFA operate, and therefore other associations like UEFA, etc., operate, have deemed to be unlawful. But this is a very highly specific case about a player who claimed that he had not been paid his wages, which is a basic kind of human right. You've done the work, you deserve to get paid for it, and therefore so unilaterally ended his contract with Lokomotiv Moscow. Lokomotiv Moscow basically pursued Diarra for compensation for him basically ending his contract, and FIFA sided with the club and ordered him to pay vast amounts of money of compensation, and actually to the extent that it stopped him even from being able to sign for another club, because they wouldn't release his registration, which is the key piece of paper that is needed for a player to play for another employer. So it's a very, very specific case. And it's in relation to that case that these findings have been made. But what has happened is the newspapers need to sell newspapers, and so extreme positions have been taken. That on the one hand, you've got FIFPro, which is the FIFA professional footballers body, who sniff the opportunity for greater freedoms for their members, and then you've got FIFA and UEFA and lawyers on their side saying, it's a couple of paragraphs in our regs. We need to work on those and we'll smooth it out and it'll be all right, sort of thing. So I'm not yet at the stage of declaring this is some Bosman type, revolution as far as the transfer system is concerned. And indeed, if it were to go down that route, that would be incredibly disruptive for everybody in football. Football the courts recognise that football, like any sports, has the right to, especially not as dispensations, but certainly to have regulations which provide an element of control to ensure integrity of their competitions and fairness and so forth. So, for example, if I take it to the nth degree, if you had absolute freedom, as there is in our marketplace in terms of normal people and jobs outside of football, for example, you could end up in ludicrous situations where it gets to the end of the season. Nottingham Forest, I'm just picking a random club whatever, need to win their last game in the Premier League to not get relegated, and they hire like half of Bayern Munich's first team for a week just to play that last game, and then they win and they stay up. That's the kind of, if you game it, that's the sort of rational conclusion to, if you opened it all up and said, oh, we can, you can't have more than a week's notice, a month's notice, blah, 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 blah. So nobody wants that, right? Nobody, and that's not going to be an acceptable way to run football. So I suspect that FIFA, the lawyers, will come up with a way of, finessing, getting just the right side of the findings in such a way that doesn't blow up the whole game, doesn't destroy the fabrics of the transfer market. There might be some changes, but I honestly would caution that it's quite as revolutionary as the press immediately positioned it.
Yeah, as seismic as they have suggested. I want to talk, guys, about Liam Scales. Liam Scales, who scores last night his first international goal. He can add that onto his first Champions League goal this season. Things are going well for him. Ireland, of course, beat Finland 2-1. And he shared the pitch for a spell with Adam Ida last night. Mikey Johnson was an unused sub. Poor wee Mikey. Right, let's talk about Liam then. Liam Scales, the evolution of Liam Scales as a footballer has been incredible. I think Brendan Rodgers was waxing lyrical about him last season, Jim, saying that he's the best success story of his type during his coaching career. A lot of Celtic fans look at Liam Scales almost as a temporary measure until somebody better comes along. But he has been brilliant this season, in my view. I guess we could look at the Dortmund game, and say no one was great in that particular match. But other than that, Liam Scales is a fine season. He is now a first pick. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. And I don't think anybody's seen this coming, Jim, in terms of a player who was almost out the door to Aberdeen, and now he's a mainstay in this team.
I think he suffers from the journey that he's made to get to Celtic Park. I think if he came from Legia Warsaw and we signed him for £4 million, people would be raving about him. It's just that journey that I don't think he's that good. He's went to Aberdeen, blah, blah, blah. He's been fantastic this season. He's been fantastic last season. It's a good partnership with Carter Vickers. It's a shame that Carter Vickers gets injured as much as he does, because that's your bedrock of any team. If you want to win leagues, don't lose goals, and that's all down to your goalkeeper and your two centre backs. So, yeah, I mean, there's nothing much more you can say about Liam Scales. He's international now. He scored a goal, Champions League goal. He's been very consistent, and I think the first game at Ibrox last season was a bit of a turning point when him and Big Lagerbielke managed to keep a clean sheet. I think that was massive to know that. That's the hardest game you're going to get in Scotland, and you went there and didn't lose a goal. And it was a time where the team were lacking a bit of confidence. And I think once he got over that game, I think everything went from strength to strength there. So I think he's been great. And I think it's just that perception that, well, he came from, which team did he play for before?
Shamrock Rovers.
So he can't be that good if he plays for Shamrock Rovers. And it's that kind of snobbery, I think. And I've said this before. I think because of the way Celtic, I think you've only got to look at McCowan. Luke McCowan from Dundee, how he killed the ball last week that led to the second goal. I think if you can take good players from the lower end of the Premier League or the top end of the Championship, you put them in a good Celtic team and give them the freedom to play, all of a sudden they're good players. I had this chat before about Steve Archibald back in the day for younger listeners. Steve Archibald. Yeah. I always thought Steve Archibald was just dead lucky. He get moves at the right time. And all of a sudden he was playing with Clyde, and then he's playing with Barcelona. You think, how did that happen? You're thinking, if you take somebody and put him alongside Glenn Hoddle at Spurs, of course you'll be a good player. I've since met people who actually played with Steve Archibald and talked about he's the most single-minded, determined person they'd ever met. But I always just think that, there's lots of really good players in Scotland, and you could take them and put them into our first team, and I think they perform well. So, but I think it's that kind of snobbery thing. If we sign somebody from Dunfermline tomorrow, what we sign him for?
We spoke about that when Nisbet was there, didn't we? We actually spoke about Kevin Nisbet when he was playing for the Pars. We wouldn't sign him. We never would sign him.
Yeah, because also we was involved in kids football for a number of years, and the talent's out there. We've got phenomenal talent in this country. It's about finding it and nurturing it, and they'll not all end up at Celtic Park or Ibrox, where we'd likely want to go to. They're out playing for Morton, or they're playing for Dunfermline, or they're playing for Airdrie, whatever. There'll be gems out there. But there's a snobbery of that, well, you can't sign them. sign somebody from, the Feyenoord, or sign somebody from wherever. Don't sign them from Dunfermline. I think that snobbery has to go.
I think there's a couple of really good points there. The first one being the Legia Warsaw one. We signed Nawrocki for 4.3. If he was turning in that level of performance for Celtic, man of the match, in Champions League games, scoring goals in the Champions League, would probably be saying, he's worth every penny. I'm going to get Alan's take on it because I'm always interested to hear about the centre-half situation at Celtic. The other point I was going to ask, actually, Jim, in relation to Archibald, was it Billy McNeill who signed him for Aberdeen?
I thought he signed him for Clyde. I wasn't sure about Aberdeen.
Right, so he signed him for Clyde. I would need to check that, but yeah, he ended up at East Fife. A couple of the boys that played for their team played first-team football for him at East Fife at the age of 16. Alan, Liam Scales, he passes the eye test a lot of the time. Does he pass the data test? This is the big question.
So I think Liam Scales has not really changed that much in terms of strengths, weaknesses, but what we saw is a very similar journey, I think, to what we saw with Karl Stauffer, where it was a really, really rocky introduction to the team. A lot of individual errors. It just didn't look right, especially the first sort of 6 months. And then in season 2, it just the partnership with Carter Vickers, but the whole team really. And I come back to this: the whole cohesiveness of the team improved, and it became the sum of the parts was greater than the individuals, and the individual weaknesses of the players were kind of smoothed over a little bit by the way that the team was gelling together as a unit. And I think we're seeing that. We have seen that this season. I think there's certain players who, and I'm going to pick on Greg Taylor, on Liam Scales, and on Daizen Maeda. Now, perhaps coincidentally, but those 3 players are all just about on that peak age of 26, 27 as well, 25, 26. They're kind of entering their peak. So it may well be that is one of the reasons that they're just. I mean, when I looked at Greg Taylor this season, for example. The way I would characterize his improvement is he's just a bit tidier. Everything's a bit tidier. He's just being a bit less careless. Everything's a little bit sharper. And I think it's probably the same with Scales. I mean, Scales has had the same weaknesses as Starfelt in being caught under the ball, being pulled out of position, trying to win balls he can't win. Scales doesn't have Starfelt's recovery pace, but what Scales gives you that Starfelt didn't have is. He's far better on the ball, and he's much safer on the ball, and he's quickened up his passing a little bit as well, and that helps the team to move the ball a bit more fluidly. And he's just an example of a player who, whatever the limits of his technical ability, he's absolutely maximizing his opportunities through his hard work, through his brilliant attitude, through his willingness to work, through his willingness to learn. And I'd rather have a team of Greg Taylors, Liam Scaleses, and Maedas than I would, for example, Palmas and sometimes even, Hitati, who have got bags of talent, bags of individual technical ability, but it's kind of 50-50 which one turns up on a Saturday.
Yeah.
And it oscillates between match winning and just anonymous. Whereas with Scales, with Taylor, with Maeda, I hold up as 3 players who there's clear technical deficiencies and some physical deficiencies as well, but who absolutely are gone out of their way as professional footballers to maximise themselves. And that's how you win football matches, if you have more of those kind of characters and personalities. So fair play to him. Great that he's got an international goal. Great that he's hopefully going to become a regular for the Irish national team as well. That's brilliant. And it's a great story, and this is a way forward for Celtic, like you say, rather than splaff $4.5 million to Legia Warsaw for centre half. Find the next Liam Scales and nurture them and give them belief and believe in them and give them time. Scales has had time. Scales has made mistakes. Scales has had bad games, but we've stuck with him, and I think we've got a really solid player now. Could we do better? Yes, I think we probably could, but you can't deny him. You can't deny him his place in the team at all.
No, I absolutely agree with that. I'm going to ask you a quick one, Jim. I've had a few questions about, and if you know the history, which is a player that you've worked many months on. but unfortunately it's being rescheduled. You want to fill everybody in that may have bought tickets for that?
Yeah, it's been good to have a chat about Celtic with you two guys to take my mind off this, because all I've been doing since Tuesday try and reschedule it. I'm a control freak, as you know, Paul, and this happened, it's out with my control. So apologies to everyone who bought tickets. I'm trying to reschedule it as soon as possible. So I appreciate your patience. Yes, I'm trying to get the reschedules as soon as. It was all lined up. We'd sold out the 4 performances. The aforementioned David Heyman was coming to see it. Brian Dempsey was coming to see it, who obviously features in that era. Murdo was coming, Tom Boyd, etc. Had a brilliant cast. Young lad called Kyle Gardner, who's no doubt tuning in, is a huge Acsom fan, huge Celtic fan. Phenomenal young actor, big future ahead of the young guy. He stars as Ur Willie in the Ur Willie Panto that's coming up in Dundee. So if you're in Dundee, go and see that. But I need to get it rescheduled as soon as possible. And it's just so disappointing. At the time I thought, well, hey ho, that's the way things work out. But in the past few days, it's become a bit more gutting. Yeah, I spent about 18 months on this, and all the ducks were in a row, and it was all set. And it's been a bit of a crushing disappointment. But out with my control, there's nothing I could do about it. So, hey ho, I'll get it rescheduled as soon as possible.
This is it. We know you will, Jim. We know you absolutely will. A big shout out to Brendan Monaghan, who may be listening to Acsom whilst paying his first visit to the Estadio Nacional in Lisbon, where something
I'm going
very
next
special
week.
happened. Are you going next week, Jim?
I'm going next week. Buzz, I'm going next week. Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. Absolutely superb. One final thing, ladies and gents. We thank you all for your support. Unbelievable. Even during an international week where it's all a bit quiet on the old Celtic front. But we do manage to bring guys like Alan and Jim into the conversation to keep everybody entertained and informed. We are up for a couple of awards next month, and the voting shuts on Sunday. We won't be on over the weekend, obviously. But the voting shuts on Monday. If you want to help us out, we're up for 2 awards. The first one is International Podcast, Best International Podcast. The second one, Best Influencer. I've stuck a wee link underneath this video. If you want to help us out, click on the link and vote for a Celtic State of Mind Acsom. And hopefully we can bring a couple of trophies up the road. It's at Ange Postecoglou's Spurs Stadium. Not that he owns it, but obviously he's down there. I don't know if he'll be there, but we're going to be visiting them in November, and hopefully we'll win an award or 2 and bring it back up the road. I've got to thank everybody, because even though there's not a great deal happening, keep turning out, even for a friendly against Sligo Rovers. So thanks every single one of you. And all that's left for me to say, Alan Morrison and Jim Orr, thank you for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.
Cheers, Paul.